So far, we have discussed markets and what we might call partial equilibrium analysis. We've already also discussed problems in free markets, failures, and failures in government. Now, though, we take a quantum leap into what we call introduction to macroeconomics. Macroeconomics is the study of the entire economy versus segments of the economy, and is often called general equilibrium analysis. And what it deals with is how to measure the size and scope and activities in the entire economy, as you will note from the subheading. This is obviously a big undertaking and can sometimes be extremely abstract because you're adding together all kinds of different products and services into one number, which we will discuss next. And what we're discussing here is the gross domestic product. Gross domestic product, it measures economic activity for the economy. And what it does is aggregates all the output in the economy during a particular period of time. You notice it's defined as the value of all final goods and services produced in the economy in 1 year. Let's look at this definition and take it apart. First, it says the value of all final goods and services. Well, what that means is exactly what it says, except you have to be careful. What we're measuring here is the dollar value of all the final goods and services being produced in the economy in a year. What do we mean by that? Well, many goods that are produced in the economy are not what we call final goods. They're intermediate goods. And then the question becomes is why don't we add those in? Well, we already have when we measure the final goods. For instance, let's assume you're building a car. You're going to put starter on it. You're going to put you're going to put steel into it. You're going to put tires on it. You're going to put a transmission in it. These are all the intermediate parts that go into the final building of the car. When we sell the car, we assume that price is going to take into account every product or every item or every intermediate good that goes into that car. If we were to count the intermediate goods and the final good both, we would actually double count. And so for that reason, we only look at final goods and services. What we mean by value, as I indicated, is just the current selling price of the final goods and services sold in the economy. It's a simple equation where you multiply the selling price of each final good or service sold in the economy each year, i.e. P times Q. So GDP, gross domestic product, can rise because of two things. Either prices can rise or output can rise. As we're going to see a little bit later, we're much more interested in the output rising than the price because the price doesn't do anything. Output, though, is very important because it uses resources and actually measures the production. So later we'll talk about how we adjust out these price changes. Note we only count the final goods and services because the other goods made are intermediate goods and they go into the production of the final good. If we count them in the final good, it will count that production twice since the final good includes the cost of all the intermediate goods. The other important word here is produced. In order to be counted in GDP that year, it must be produced that year. Items that are sold and not produced in that year are not included. So all the used items sold do not add to GDP. So for instance, I have an older home. If I sell it to somebody, it's not included in GDP. The only houses that are going to be sold and counted in GDP are new homes. That's the reason we have such a great interest in new housing starts when we measure GDP and talk about the economy. In the economy means simply whatever country, economy or county. It could be a county, a state, or a city, and you can obtain this information for just about any political subdivision you can. Some countries keep very good records, some don't keep very good records. Depends an awful lot on the development of the country. Finally, we annualize everything, so everything's done on a yearly basis. Now, based on the definition we have given you, what we are really defining is what we really call nominal GDP, because we're taking this year's output and measuring it at this year's prices. That means each year's production is measured in this year's prices, and that means that nominal GDP could rise because output rose or because prices rose. For that reason, we prefer real GDP, which removes price changes and gives us a better idea of real production increases. We'll show how this is calculated later. But in general, what it simply says is we assume that prices do not change over the years that we're measuring, and that way we get a better measure of the output level. There are basically two problems in macroeconomics, and these are the two major problems that emanate from one place. If you remember, we discussed the production possibility curve. If we were on the curve, we were at full employment. If we were inside the curve, we had unemployment. Further, as we push hard against the curve and get closer to full employment, we get inflation because the economy can't produce anymore. In the ideal world, there will be low unemployment and low inflation, and that's the struggle, and that is the struggle the field of economic policy must deal with. Another concern in macroeconomics is how much savings and investment we have. Since investment is paid for through savings, in order to increase investment, people must consume less today. In other words, they must put off consumption today so they will have more consumption tomorrow because there will be more production tomorrow. This means if we consume less today, but we're able to produce and consume more tomorrow, so that in this case the trade-off is for consumption today or more consumption tomorrow. This savings filters through banks and financial markets into the hands of those that can invest the money for future production. Uncertainty, expectations, and shocks play a big role in our economy. In a perfect world, where everything is known, the economy would move along nicely, expanding at about the same rate each year, which over the long run is about 3.1%. In the real world, we must deal often with unanticipated concerns as shown in the title. By definition, uncertainty is an event that could not have been known and planned for, such as 9/11. Expectations are formed for various reasons. Some reasons are good, but some are not. They may also change, and they may be difficult to change. If something is expected, we can plan for it and reduce the negative impact. If it is unexpected, then we cannot prepare for it. In macroeconomics, expectations may be self-fulfilling. This relates to shocks. As indicated, a shock to our system that is not planned for is unanticipated and can have a very large negative impact. If it is anticipated, it can often be partially offset. Since shocks are unforeseen, then they cannot be totally planned for. How the economy reacts depends on whether prices are sticky or they are rigid. When we studied individual commodities in highly competitive situations, we found assumed changes in demand would change prices. This may not be true in the entire economy, where some companies have more market power. What is the impact of a shock with a sticky price? Well, if you assume you have a manufacturer who does not want to cut prices in the face of a big decrease in demand, and for instance in the graph below he has set his price and his demand has gone from A to B to C, notice what happens. Prices don't change, that's a given, but output does. He just continues to produce less and less and less to equilibrate the market through quantity and not through price. What this also means is he's using fewer resources, and one of the things he's probably going to do is lay off workers. So as you can see, as the demand declines, if the company maintains their price at the same price level and is unchanged, production will be reduced. This means a layoff of workers, reduction of production. Assume on the other hand, a manufacturer allows their prices to move flexibly with demand changes. In the extreme case where the company wants to maintain output, we would get the following. Demand would drop from A to B to C. That means that prices do change, but quantities do not. This is an issue of debate. Some prices are very flexible, such as commodity prices. Some prices are sticky, especially manufactured goods. They will change output rather than change prices. The more competitive markets are, the more flexible